Most of us know the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, and we definitely know about Abraham. But what about that huge chunk of the story in between? We're talking about Genesis chapters 4 through 11. These are the chapters that are so often skipped over, but they're absolutely key to understanding how everything went so wrong so fast.
So, you have to ask, right? The Bible kicks off with this perfect garden, a place where everything is in perfect harmony. And then, bam, just a few chapters later, it's all violence, corruption, and full-on rebellion. How did it all fall apart so fast? Well, here's the thing. The story seems to suggest humanity didn't just drift into darkness. They sprinted. In that sprint, it starts right away. I mean, literally right outside the gates of Eden with the very first family. This first big fracture, it's a family drama between two brothers, Cain and Abel. Now, you might think the issue here is, a farming dispute, vegetables versus livestock, but that's not it at all. The source is really clear on this. It wasn't about what they brought, but how they brought it. Abel's offering, it cost him something. It was an act of real faith. Cain's, it was basically the leftovers, the easy thing to do. It was an act of convenience. See the difference? One is genuine worship, the other is just checking a box.
So when God rejects Cain's offering, he doesn't just get struck by lightning. No, he gets a direct warning from God himself, who says sin is crouching at the door. I mean, think about that. This is huge. It means Cain knows exactly what's at stake. He's not clueless. He has a clear choice to make, a chance to master this dark impulse, and he chooses not to.
And right there, from the very start, we get this foundational idea. Evil isn't some accident. It's not just ignorance or, oops, I made a mistake. No, it's presented as a conscious, deliberate choice. It's rebellion. People know what the right thing to do is, and they choose to do the opposite. And believe me, this idea, it sets the stage for literally everything that's about to happen. Okay, so things are already bad, right? But the rebellion just keeps building on itself, because the problem doesn't stay contained to just humanity for very long. As the population grows, the rebellion escalates, and it goes from being just an earthly problem to a cosmic one. And this is where we get to one of the weirdest, most debated passages in the entire Bible. It says, "The sons of God saw the daughters of men." So you have to ask, who in the world are these sons of God? Now, the source material we're looking at argues this isn't just some poetic way of talking about human kings or powerful people. No, this is the language of a full-blown cosmic invasion. So to get what's happening here, we have to talk about something called the divine council. Think of them as, as spiritual beings, kind of like angels, that God created to help manage the cosmos under his authority. What Genesis is describing then isn't just a human problem, it's a spiritual rebellion. Some of these powerful beings went rogue. They crossed a boundary they were never supposed to cross and started messing with humanity directly, and in the process corrupting all of creation. And the fallout from this? It's an absolute catastrophe. The corruption isn't just a human thing anymore. It's woven into the spiritual fabric of the world. Violence just explodes everywhere. Heaven and earth, which were designed to work together in perfect harmony, are now completely out of whack. The whole system has descended into chaos. So what do you do when you have a total system failure like this? How does God respond? Well, it's not a small fix. It's not a slap on the wrist. He hits the reset button on a planetary scale. We're talking about the Great Flood. Now, a lot of us grew up thinking of the flood as just God being angry and punishing a bunch of bad people. But the way our source material frames it is a little different and a lot deeper. It wasn't just punishment, it was a cosmic cleansing. It was God's way of dealing with that spiritual rebellion, of putting those chaotic forces back in their box, and literally washing the world clean to give humanity a second chance. But, and this is a huge but, here's the twist in the story. Even a global flood couldn't fix the real problem. Wiping the slate clean wasn't enough, because when the waters finally went down, the root of rebellion, that thing in the human heart that wants to go its own way, it survived. It was right there on the ark with Noah and his family. And yeah, it does not take long for that problem to pop up again. Only this time, it's bigger, more organized. Humanity's next big act of defiance isn't just a few rogue individuals. It's a unified global project, the Tower of Babel. Their whole motivation is summed up in this one line: let us make a name for ourselves. I mean, that says it all, doesn't it? God's very first command to them was to scatter, to fill the earth. And what do?
The exact opposite. They all gather in one spot to build a monument to their own greatness, to seize their own glory. It's the same rebellion we saw in the garden, just blown up to a global scale. This time, God doesn't respond with another flood. His solution is division. He scrambles their languages, which forces them to scatter across the earth, forming different nations. And then, and this is a really critical point from our source, God essentially hands over these new nations to the authority of those lesser spiritual beings, members of that same divine council. And guess what? It's a disaster. They become corrupt, terrible rulers who lead all the nations of the world astray. So let's just recap, because it's a mess. We've got human rebellion, which leads to cosmic corruption. That leads to a failed reset with the flood, which then leads to another, even bigger rebellion at Babel, which then leads to a world of scattered nations all run by corrupt spiritual cowards. The whole situation looks completely hopeless, right? But it's right here, in the middle of this total mess, that God kicks off a brand new, completely surprising plan.
So, by the time we get to the end of Genesis chapter 11, the problem is massive. It's global. You've got scattered nations, corrupt spiritual rulers. The whole world is in disarray. But the solution? It's shockingly local. Instead of another big, dramatic global event, God zooms way, way in. He completely changes his strategy. He calls one guy, not a king, not a warrior, not a religious leader, just a regular man named Abram, living in a place called which is in modern-day Iraq. And get this, he calls him out of Babylon, the very heartland of humanity's rebellion, and says, you're the start of my solution.
The source we're using has this fantastic analogy for what God is doing here. Imagine a parent who wants to give candy to a whole room of kids. Instead of just throwing it everywhere, they give the whole bag to one child and say, okay, I'm going to teach you how to share this with everybody. That's the plan. God is giving his blessing to one family, Abraham's family, not for them to keep it for themselves, but to teach them how to steward it, so that through them, that blessing can finally be shared with all the other nations that got so broken and scattered at Babel. So you see, Genesis 4 through 11, they're not just a bunch of random, crazy stories. They are the essential setup for the entire rest of the biblical story. This is the why. Why is the world so fractured? Why does evil seem to run so deep? And why in the world did God choose this one seemingly random family to launch his rescue mission? The answers are all right here.
And this really is the key takeaway from all of this. Abraham's family, which would become the nation of Israel, they weren't chosen because they were better or more special than anyone else. It wasn't about privilege. It was about responsibility. They were chosen to be the vehicle, the carriers of God's blessing, to bring it back to a world that was completely broken and divided.
And that really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? If these first few chapters lay out the basic pattern, the playbook of rebellion and rescue, then it makes you wonder, what should we be looking for as the story unfolds from here? How are we going to see these same themes of rebellion, scattering, and God's rescue plan play out over and over again on the long journey toward fixing this broken world?